All right, go ahead and go to 1 Kings chapter 4. In this chapter, we are going to continue to see the rise of Solomon. God has established the kingdom in his hand. And in the previous chapters, we see God had granted him wisdom, making him wiser than any before or after him. And in this chapter, it's mostly going over details about how God blessed him, how God basically made him very mighty and very wealthy. And at the end of this chapter, we're going to see how news of his kingdom began to spread in the world. And I want to briefly go through, what we're going to do in this message tonight, we're going to briefly go through the details of this chapter. But then I do want to try to put some things in perspective that hopefully will make you very thankful for the day and age that we live in, but also just kind of put certain things in perspective. This chapter is one word it's just kind of giving a lot of facts that won't really preach, but we've got something at the end that'll preach, and I've got a message for you. So this is one of those historical chapters, but look at verse 1. It says, "So King Solomon was king over all Israel, and these were the princes which he had: Azariah the son of Zadok the priest, Elihoreph and Ahiah the sons of Shisha scribes, Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud the recorder, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was over the host." Remember, Benaiah is the guy that we like that's always killing everybody. That's just always waiting and ready to just kill as soon as Solomon says so. And it says, "And Zadok and Abiathar were the priest, and Azariah the son of Nathan was over the officers, and Zabad the son of Nathan was principal officer and the king's friend, and Ahishar was over the council or household, and Adoniram the son of Abda was over the tribute. And Solomon had 12 officers over all Israel, which provided victuals for the king and his household, each man his month, in a year made provision. And these are their names: the son of Hur in Mount Ephraim, the son of Dekar, and Makaz, and Shalbim, and Bethshemesh, and Elon Beth Hanan, the son of Hesed in Araboth. To him pertained Shokah and all the land of Hepher, and the son of Abinadab in all the region of Dor, which had Taphath, the daughter of Solomon, to wife. And Baanah, the son of Ahilud, to him pertained Taanach and Megiddo, and all Bethshean, which is by Zartana, beneath Jezreel, from Bethshean to Abel Meholah, even unto the place that is beyond Jokneam. The son of Geber in Ramoth Gilead, to him pertained the towns of Jair, the son of Manasseh, which are Gilead. To him also pertained the region of Argob, which is in Bashan, 80 great cities, and walls and brazen bars. Ahinadab, the son of Iddo, had Mahanaim. Ahimaaz was in Naphtali. He also took Basmath, the daughter of Solomon, to wife. Baanah, the son of Hushai, was in Asher and Aloth. Jehoshaphat, the son of Peruah, in Issachar. Shimei, the son of Eli, in Benjamin. And Geber, the son of Uri, was in the country of Gilead, in the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. And he was the only officer which was in the land. Judah and Israel were many as the sand which is by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and making merry. And Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river unto the land of the Philistines and unto the border of Egypt. They brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life." Now, without spending a lot of time on each of these details, I do want to just point out a few highlights. First off, one of the things that I noticed as I was going through the names of all these people and trying to pay attention to who they were, and we're not going to talk a lot about each of them. Some of them we know nothing about except what is mentioned in this chapter. But I do think it's interesting when we see the people that Solomon chose to help him lead. I like the fact that we see names of people who were involved with David. And I think it's pretty cool, too, that some of the people that are involved with him are the sons of people who also helped David. One thing that I pay very close attention to as a Baptist pastor is I like to, as I know, I try to pay attention to those who are able to get the next generation doing the same thing. I want what we do here to continue after I'm gone. I want it to continue with my children. I want it to continue with my grandchildren. And so I notice these things. And when I see the great men that were with David, I am very encouraged when I see the sons of those great men also serving with Solomon. It just kind of shows a continued path that Solomon was on. And Solomon he was doing like David, his father, in many ways. And I love seeing that kind of thing. I was at a meeting not too long ago, and I looked over not far from me, and I saw a pastor. He's in evangelism now, but I saw him there with his son, who is a pastor, and I saw that pastor with his son, who I believe is a Bible college student right now. And I like seeing that kind of thing. Seeing 3 generations all sitting there in church, all fundamental Baptists, all serving the Lord. That kind of thing is a blessing to me. I am not here to just serve my own purpose, do my own thing, collect my paycheck, and then just who cares what happens to my family, and then I just go die someday. I want things to continue. I want my kids doing the same thing. And parents, you ought to be shooting for the same thing. And let me just throw in a little bonus sermon in here. What will help you a lot, if you want your kids to be fundamental Baptists like you're a fundamental Baptist, make sure you're one at home, not just at church. Don't be a hypocrite, otherwise your kids are not going to follow you. Just mark that down. But I think it's pretty cool how we see it mentions specifically the sons of some of these people. We see a son of Nathan. I don't know for sure if that's a reference to Nathan the prophet, which I think would be pretty cool if that was the case. It mentions, I forgot to make note of all of these, but it mentioned, I forgot who it was, Azariah, the son of Zadok the priest. And we know Zadok was the one who was replaced, or he was the replacement on the good side. We see his son continuing. And I like seeing that. And if you'll go back and you'll take the time to look up all of these names, you'll see some names that were associated with David, or you'll see men who were sons of men who associated themselves with David. Also, we're seeing, too, certain people who married Solomon's daughters, showing, too, that that's something that's going to strengthen him, that's going to help him have loyalty amongst the leaders in these other tribes. And so we're also seeing names of areas mentioned. Megiddo is a place that's mentioned. And something else, too, that is very important. While we read these things and we just look over it, it's not even a really big deal to us. Understand this was very important stuff in their history, because this is showing Israel finally fully taking possession of the land. And even though in many ways Israel had conquered the land in Joshua's day, they did not fill the land yet. When they took over the land, that did not mean all of the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land were gone. God said He wasn't going to drive them out all at once, otherwise the land would become overgrown and it would end up causing problems for them. But God basically wanted it to be in a way where as they grew as a people, they would be able to get rid of those people as they needed. And so here we see Israel basically taking control over more of the land. And in reality, that's kind of what's going on as well, even today in Israel. When we look, there's so much stuff about Israel in the news right now. One of the things you'll hear talked about a lot in the news right now is East Jerusalem. And if you go over into East Jerusalem, one of the things you'll see over there is it's a very, heated area, because it is full of Muslims or Palestinians. Palestinians are all living there. So most people look at those neighborhoods and they say, this is Palestinian territory. That's what the UN would say. That's what the Democrats would say. That's what all the Muslim countries would say. That's what the Palestinians would say. But the Israelis are like, this is Jerusalem. These people are literally living on top of many sections of the city of David. That's ours. That belongs. They think all of it is theirs, and so they are constantly doing things to try to get rid of some of those Palestinians and take that land, which makes Palestinians mad, and it makes a lot of the world mad. And so, if you talk to people in Israel, they will say, "Yeah, that is ours," but at the same time, they're not using it like they want to. They're not doing what they want to do with it because they got them pesky Palestinians there. And so it was kind of the same thing they had back then. Now, at least back then, if they had the strength to get rid of the Canaanites or whatever, they could do it just like that, and the UN wouldn't throw a big hissy fit, and other countries wouldn't necessarily come after them like it would happen today. And let me just say this right now. Israel today, they absolutely have the military power to get rid of all the Palestinians. However, if they did, then it's probably going to cause a world war. And so America, we're over here always saying, not yet, not yet, not yet, even though, a lot of our Zionist leaders would love nothing more than for them to just go ahead and take it all. But that's another subject for another day. But when I was reading this, I just find it interesting how similar the situation is today as it was back then. And it's just a reminder of what happens when you're disobedient. And guess what? Those Jews over there, they're still really disobedient. And what they need to just do is they need to just get saved and believe on Christ and wait for him to come back and set up his kingdom, and then they can have the land then. In the meantime, they're wasting their time over there. But that's another subject for another day. But again, while the land was theirs, it didn't mean they had full use of it. So verse 22 says, and Solomon's provision for one day was 30 measures of fine flour and 80 measures of meal. As they are now taking over more and more of this land, you know what that means? More resources for them. They're going to become richer as a nation. That's why nations are always kind of interfering in other nations' borders. They want their resources. They want that land. They want their people to be able to live there so they can get tax money and they can get tax revenue and things from them. And so Israel is becoming very wealthy under Solomon's reign because they're taking over more of these areas. They're accumulating all these resources. And it says 10 fat oxen and 20 oxen out of the pastures and 100 sheep, besides hart and roebucks and fallow deer and fatted fowl. For he had dominion over all the region on this side from the river, from Tiphish even to Azza, over all the kings on this side of the river. And he had peace on all sides round about him. So this is showing the wealth of Solomon's kingdom and all that was coming in, which when a country is doing well financially, typically people calm down. When people get hungry, that's when people get agitated. That's when people are discontent. That's when they're more likely to have some kind of uprising. And God is blessing so much. Things are peaceful. People are loyal. They're loving Solomon. And having an abundance of food is very important to keep a nation strong. So verse 25, and Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. And whenever you see that Dan to Beersheba, Dan, they were the northernmost tribe, and then Beersheba was down in the southern part of the nation. And so that's basically just like from the top to the bottom, just the entire nation. They were doing very good. God was blessing them in a great way. And so one of the greatest signs of a successful leader, is when he is keeping the people safe. That's one of the things that we want from our government, to keep us safe. And I think we have to admit that our nation has done very good in keeping us safe from foreign armies. How many of you are worried about getting your house bombed tonight or anything like that? Now, most areas where our nation could do a better job is in more domestic related things. But even out here, they're doing pretty good. We're pretty safe, around here. We're very blessed in that area. Obviously, cities are doing really bad. And if you want to know what places are more dangerous, just typically look where there's more Democrats running things, and things are typically more dangerous. That's just kind of the way it is. And the reason it's not safe there is because of bad leadership. Bad leadership. But when things are safe, that's good. So you want safety, and you want even prosperity, meaning you want your needs met, and you don't want to have to worry about starving. And just kind of an interesting thing, turn over to Isaiah chapter 9. This is one of the more famous messianic passages about Jesus Christ. It says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Watch this. Of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Now, I listened to a Ruckmanite one time say that this means, of the increase of his government, it means it will always get bigger for all eternity, which is why they believe we are going to inhabit other planets one of these days. Because if the kingdom just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger for eternity, well, eventually we're going to run out of room on this planet. Because it says increase. That means bigger and bigger, right? No, that's not what that means. Okay, increase, that's what you bring in. When you go and you plant crops, what you get back, you always get back more than you planted, don't you? And you know what that's called? That's called increase. And when you receive good increase, you know what that means? You're well fed. And so when it says of the increase of his government, it means we're always going to have what we need. There's going to be no end to that. And of his peace, there shall be no end. You want to know what two things destroy kingdoms? Famines and invading armies. That's what destroys kingdoms. That's what causes empires to fall. If they run out of money, if they run out of resources, if the people start starving, they start dying, and the kingdom becomes weakened. Or a more powerful army comes in and defeats them. When it comes to the kingdom of Christ, of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end. And so that's what that means. So don't ever let anybody use that verse to prove we're going to inhabit other planets one of these days. That's ridiculous. And the way he did it was like he wasn't winning the crowd over. So when he made that statement too, he basically, the way he got them to kind of get on board with it, he said it's mainly for the Jews. That's what he kind of threw in there. It's just like, you can get away with saying anything as long as you say it's like a good thing for the Jews. They get to inherit all the other planet. You know, we'll get stuck here on a moon or something somewhere. You know, us dirty Gentiles. But anyway, enough making fun of them. But Solomon, when his kingdom, God was blessing it with great increase and also great peace. And again, wars and famines, that is what typically takes out kingdoms. And so verse 26, and Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. And those officers provided victual for King Solomon and for all that came unto him, unto King Solomon's table, every man in his month. They lacked nothing. Barley also and straw for the horses and dromedaries brought they unto the place where the officers were, every man according to his charge. And listen, just having a strong military, right there, that can prevent wars from happening. I'm glad we have a strong military in our country. But you know what else I think makes our nation strong? Not just a strong military. In fact, I don't want our military to get too strong. I think just having a well-armed people will also make us strong. That's going to make it where not only are foreign armies not going to want to come in, it's like, man, we're going to have to go through those rural countries. Those places are vast and spread out, and those people are armed to the teeth. And you know what? Other nations, like, we can't take over that country. These people are too well armed. Don't ever let them take our guns. But also, not only will it will deter foreign armies from messing with us, it will deter our own army from wanting to mess with us. And so I think it's a very good thing. If you don't own a gun, I highly recommend you become a gun owner. And if you already have one, just go ahead and get another one. The more guns, they keep track of all the guns and ammo that's being bought. You hear those numbers, and you know what? The government knows about it, and it's one of the things that helps them behave a little bit. So just a very good thing. But again, having that strength, that alone will bring peace. And so I am all for being strong, and they were definitely strong in Solomon's day. And it says, and this is where I want to start preaching a little bit. Verse 29 says, and God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding, exceeding much largeness of heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. So not only did Solomon have this great wisdom, but he had largeness of heart, or as we say today, he had a big heart. And I think we all understand what that means. And we see in 2 Corinthians 6:10, as sorrowful yet always rejoicing, as poor yet making many rich, as having nothing and yet possessing all things. O ye Corinthians, our mouth is open unto you, our heart is enlarged. And so that largeness of heart, it's a term, basically means having a deep capacity for empathy, compassion, and moral understanding. And isn't that what you want to have with a leader in your country? Somebody that can empathize with you, somebody who knows what it's like, somebody who knows what it's like to struggle living from paycheck to paycheck like Donald Trump's always had to do. Think about a billionaire. Yeah, he's not one of us, ladies and gentlemen. I know he worked at McDonald's for an afternoon and made us all think he's one of us, but he's not really one of us. But, at the same time, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here, one of the reasons Trump won like he did is him and Kamala are both elites. But Trump was really good at acting like he's one of us. He's crude. He talks vulgar like a normal guy. And he does. He's just really good at acting like one of us. Where Kamala, she just wasn't convincing about anything. And so, because people do, they want that. They want somebody with a big heart. We've all seen the video of Donald Trump sitting in church pulling all that money out. If you've seen, I've seen that one a million times. He was going to put in the offering plate. I mean, that guy's just a generous giver. That's what we've been convinced of, by the news media and things like that. But there's some people out there who do have a great deal of knowledge, but they don't always have wisdom, nor do they have a good heart. There are some really smart people out there who don't have good hearts. They don't empathize with people. They aren't good at putting themselves in other people's shoes, but they're smart. But when it comes to a leader, you want somebody that has that big heart. This is very important. They need to have that ability to empathize. That will help him make good decisions. It will make it where he's able to know what he needs to do to actually help the people. It will also help him have the ability to understand how his decisions will affect other people. That's something else that you want, somebody who realizes, hey, that I got to be careful not to ask too much of people. One of the things that I think was good for me when I started this church too, was I growing up around preachers, I knew of a lot of preachers who grew up in preachers' homes and who had never even worked a secular job. There's work, all their occupation was always with the church. And I remember times listening to some of these guys preach and just put demands on the people in the church, and I'm like, I don't think he knows what it's like to be a normal person. Because this guy had never really worked a regular job in his life, where, I've had to work regular jobs and full-time jobs while being an assistant pastor and while pastoring for a long time. So it's like, I know what it's like, to work weird shifts too. And you get really tired. And asking people to come to a revival meeting every night in a week and things like that, and then some of these, they have them all the time. I think it's like, dude, I don't think you understand what you're putting people through. You've never worked a real job before, so you know what? Shut up. And I was thankful after I started this church too, just because trying to pastor and work full time, it really helped me be understanding in those areas. And I think that kind of thing is important, and it is especially important too for somebody as consequential as a king during that time. And so verse 30, he goes on to say, and Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the wisdom of Egypt. Now, here's what I want you to do right now, okay? Often, it's hard for us to kind of put ourselves in other places and other situations in different times, okay? But I want you to try to do this tonight, because this wisdom of Solomon, it was a really big deal in the world during that time. His wisdom excelled the wise men of the East. What was it about the East always having wise men? Have you ever thought about that? Because even hundreds of years later in Jesus' day, where do the wise men come from? They came from the East. So I don't know what they had going on over there, but those people knew a lot of stuff. They had a lot of wisdom, a lot of understanding of things. But imagine, now think about this. Imagine if you lived outside Israel in that time, where would you go to learn and gain wisdom? Have you ever thought about that? Like sometimes I'll talk to my kids about things that they will never understand. They will never understand how a day in a world where the way you found out about a new movie that was going to be coming out, you had to rent a movie and watch the previews on that VHS tape before the movie started. And that's how a new movie that was coming out was announced to you. We didn't have internet back then. And so I remember, I'm trying to think of one of the movies that would get me excited. But, I remember when I loved Peter Pan as a kid. And I know I was like an adult, but I was like a new adult. I remember Return to Neverland. It was like a new continuation of Peter Pan. And you know how I found out about that? From watching a VHS, and it had a preview for that. I was like, are you kidding me? They're making another Peter Pan? And that's how you found out. Our kids, they find out things instantly from the internet. I mean, we hear these things announced way ahead of time. We had no way of knowing that stuff back then. The way you found out about the new video game that was coming out, the way you found out there was going to be a Mario 3 was when you walked into Walmart and you saw Mario 3 on the shelf. I was like, are you kidding? Another Mario game. Unless you had TV, then you'd see it on a commercial. And we didn't have TV, and sometimes my friends would announce these things to me. And so I was usually the last one to know things. Our kids will never understand that. Okay? They'll never understand where if you wanted to know something, you had to like go to a library and try to find a book on that subject. My kids were just talking this week about how old we are. And just, and they thought it was amazing that Star Wars started before I was even born. It's that old. And the first Star Wars was made before I was even born. But again, I lived in a day before Google. Okay? How many remember before Google? Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, really. I don't think we're that old. I know I'm sounding like an old fossil up here. But now we just instantly have access to all these things. Back then, if you're just living in some remote village, where do you learn things? Where do you get knowledge? Where do you gain wisdom? Anything you know is going to be what you've learned within your own village. Most of these places probably didn't have libraries and things that they could go to. Your information that you had access to was limited to what was just known in your village. So if there was another nation somewhere, another town somewhere that spoke another language, first off, you'd have to be smart enough to learn that language so you can go over there and find out what they know. So having a wise man like Solomon who had all this knowledge and understanding of things, he would have been a big draw for a lot of people. But only the elites would have been able to get to him. Only certain people would have been able to get to him. Where today, we have got so much information at our fingertips. We've got so much access to information just with our cell phone. And at the same time, though, but are we smarter today? Are we wiser today? No, we're not. And there's a reason for that. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But they didn't have television and internet. They didn't have communication like we do today. So the only access to knowledge or wisdom, you would have had to find the smartest people in your local area. And then once they tell you everything they know, all right, well, that's it. So even back then, people would have had a love and a desire for information, for wisdom. It would have been perceived as valuable to them. Where today, you want to know why we're so dumb today? Because we don't value it. For you to get the real benefits of wisdom and knowledge, it's got to be valuable to you. You've got to have an appreciation for it. If you do not have an appreciation for it, it won't do anything for you. No matter how surrounded you are by these things, you've got to have an appreciation for these people. And so these other wise men that are referred to, they probably would have been for the rich and the powerful countries that had the luxury of having people who could devote themselves to wisdom and knowledge that they could share with others. Most people were probably just trying to survive during that time. Most of their extra resources went to survival and maybe just building the military and walls so they could protect themselves from foreign invaders that would come in. But ones that were doing really good, that had a lot of strength, they would even devote some time to wisdom. And so so verse 31, he goes talking about Solomon, says, "For he was wiser than all the men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, and Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame was in all nations round about." Now, we don't really know anything about these guys, but in Psalms 89, in the beginning of it, it says Makshil of Ethan the Ezrahite. So it's very possible that he wrote Psalms 89. I don't know that section is necessarily inspired, or that note is, but just kind of an interesting thing. But verse 32, watch, it says, "And he spake 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Okay? And again, I am afraid that today we completely take for granted the absolute treasure that we hold in our laps called the Bible. Think about it. People were coming from all over the world to hear the wisdom of Solomon, And folks, we have the wisdom of Solomon written right smack in the middle of our Bibles. And how often do we read it? Folks, literally anybody in the world today, they can download an app on their phone and they can read all the wisdom of Solomon that before people would have to go on long journeys to hear, and they would eat it up. You know why? Because it meant something to them. It was important to them. It was considered as valuable. Today, we don't even care. But it's the same thing. It's the same wisdom, yet we've put no value on it today. In 1 Kings 10:21, here's what's going on. 1 Kings 10:21 says, "And all King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon." Do you all see that? His kingdom was so rich in material wealth that silver, who cares? All right, great. Like now, in our country today, we treasure silver. You know why? Because precious metals, they're worth a lot of money today. You know why? Because our paper is worth nothing. But in Solomon's day, look what it says in verse 27, "And the king made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones, and cedars made he to be as the sycamore trees that are in the vale for abundance." But folks, now think about this. Silver is still silver. It serves the exact same purposes, whether it is considered wealth or not. Do you all understand that? Silver is always silver. But do you realize that the value of something is often determined by the rarity of it? And so the wisdom that's contained in our Bibles, did you know it's just as valuable and it is just as useful today as it's ever been, but it is not, we don't treat it as valuable. We don't look at it as valuable. Things that are rare, those are the things that we make a big deal about. Those are the things that we treasure. Those are the things that we pay attention to. But the simple fact is, though, if rubies, if gold is really precious, if we've got an abundance of it, shouldn't we be thrilled with that? Shouldn't that be seen as a great thing? But what ends up happening when things become abundant, we don't care about them anymore. And understand, when it came to wisdom, when it came to the Word of God, there was a time it was very rare. There was a time in our, even in English-speaking world, when only rich people had a full copy of the Bible. Only rich people had it. And so back then, the Bible would have been considered a very valuable thing. But it's what we have today is the exact same thing. But do you understand? It's not considered treasure today. You know why? Because it is so abundant, but it's the exact same thing. So there was a time when if you gave somebody a Bible, they would have been thrilled, and that love for it, that appreciation of it, would have caused them to read it. It would have caused them to not just read it, but pay very close attention to it. It would have caused them to do whatever it says. Where today, because anybody can have a Bible, we just don't care and we neglect it. And it's not doing anything for us. And the reality is, we should be rejoicing that we live in a day like this where we've got the Bible, we've got so much access to it. It's so easy. I mean, we're able to we give Bibles out like crazy around here because we can get them cheap as well. And that's a great blessing. And so verse 34, notice it says, verse 33. It says, "And he spake of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. He spake also of beasts, and of fowl, and of creeping things, and of fishes." And notice, even just wisdom and knowledge of these things of nature would have meant a lot to people back then, where today we don't really care. There was a time too when, if you wanted to learn about certain animals, the way you would even find out they existed is maybe if you found a book somewhere, an encyclopedia. Remember encyclopedias? Remember those? Remember encyclopedia salesmen? Okay. Nobody gets bothered by those people anymore. And you would go, and they would maybe have a section in there about different animals in different parts of the world. And you could look and you would see pictures of these animals that you had never seen before. Now, what can we do? We can go on YouTube and we can see high definition videos of literally anything. And so back then, just having writings about certain things in nature would have been considered valuable to people. Also, because Solomon was wise and he was good with words, he was able to write about these things in a way that's interesting. And there are still some people out there today, I am not one of these people, who are very good at putting things to words in a way that causes you to think, in a way that's very instructive, and even that still is valued by some people today. Most of our culture today, we only value videos and pictures and images. Not words on paper. But there's still a segment of our population that's into that kind of thing. But Solomon, he had people interested in these things. It says, and there came of all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon from all the kings of the earth, which had heard of his wisdom. So when they heard about this real smart dude, they couldn't just put him on the TV and everybody could sit at home and watch it. No, you had to go. You had to get up and you had to go to see this guy and to hear what he had to say. It's like, man, we're going to learn some stuff. He's going to say some things and we're going to be able to go back home and tell everybody else about it. He's going to tell us stuff we didn't know before. He's going to give us wisdom and instruction on things that will help us. It will give us greater understanding of things. And so word got out about the greatness of Solomon, and there was a proper appreciation back then for what he was bringing to the table. But what's happened in our world, what's going on in our culture, that today, and think about it, how is it that we can live in a world where we've got so much access to everything? Look at how many people are doing drugs today, even though we know so much about what it does to you physically. There was a time when people didn't know. There was a time when people didn't fully understand what it was doing, even when they were just doing things like smoking. They didn't realize, it used to be a lot more common in our culture to smoke than people started figuring out. It's like, man, this is giving a lot of people cancer and a lot of other problems. Maybe we shouldn't do this kind of thing. But yet today, we've got people that know exactly what crack does. They know what all these other things does, and yet they don't care. They still do it. You know why? Because they have no wisdom. Even though there's all this knowledge out there. Look at all the things that we know today about STDs. But yet, is it stopping people from being promiscuous? No. They're still doing that. So we've got all this information, but at the same time, it's not valued. It's not treasured. And what's going on today, the reason I believe we're seeing so much wickedness and foolishness abound, even though access to wisdom, knowledge is just so available, is because, one, we do not recognize the true value of things contained in our Bible. In Proverbs 2:1, it says, my son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom and apply thine heart to understanding, yea, if thou criest after knowledge and liftest up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver and searchest for her as for hid treasure, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Notice that you have to be seeking. You have to treasure it. You have to see it as valuable. Otherwise, you are not going to appreciate it. So for example, something that I thought of when I was studying for this, I think this was either right before, it was right before I got married. I think I was 19. I was 19 years old, and I remember I went to a Christian bookstore, and they had this software in there. It was $80. Okay, it was $80 called Illumina. And it had all these computer animated images on there of different things in the Bible. It had these things you go on your computer and you could push these things and it would take you into like a 3D of the temple. And it even had stuff of real places, like these actual 360 images. This is when I was 19. This is 20 some years ago. Okay, and all the kids in here are like, lame. But I remember I got that program. I saved up money. I bought that $80. That was a lot of money back then. Okay, I bought that program and I was like, I am going to learn everything there is to know about the Bible with the software. And listen, I went on that software and I ate that stuff up and I learned a lot of stuff from it. I really did. But did you know all that cool stuff that I was able to do on there, you can literally do for free and so much more anywhere. On my YouTube channel, I've got 360 videos you can do on there that I took when I was in Israel of a lot of these same places. In fact, I can also get one of our kids, Oculus, and I can put it on my head, and I can stand there, and I can look in any direction, and it's like I'm there. And it is so stinking cool. I did it the other day just for fun, and it made me want to go back to Israel really bad. But there is so much we have access to. If you want to know what it's like, you know, one of the things I did one time on the Oculus, I went on YouTube on 360 videos, and I went and saw the Great Pyramids. I've always wanted to go see the Great Pyramids. And it was pretty cool. I almost felt like I was there. It's not quite the same thing, but you're able to see what it looks like. We have all this information, but at the same time, I'm telling my kids, this is so cool. They don't even care. I don't even think they've watched my 360 videos. I had to pay $80 to just get a sample of what I am providing for free on my YouTube channel, and y'all don't even care. Those are like some of the lowest views on my YouTube channel. You people are missing out on those 360 videos. Again, these things, all this information, there was all kinds of different articles on there and things you can learn. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have the internet, and there is so much more, but yet nobody knows about this stuff. All this information is out there, but nobody knows about it. You know why? Because it's not considered valuable. Because we don't have to go searching for it. Because we don't have to work for it. You know what? We don't retain it. We don't retain these things. We don't care about things that we don't have to work for. And that information it's so available, it's not accounted for. It's like silver. It's like stones. It's nothing. And so we have become, so back then, people were interested in Solomon. Why? The wisdom. It was the wisdom. Everybody wanted to see Solomon because of the wisdom. Solomon was famous because of the wisdom. That's what made him famous. But today, we have become enamored with celebrities because of just the fact that they are famous. But why are they famous? It's never because of wisdom. A lot of times it's not because of anything good. Look at how many people are. Think about Kardashians. Okay, they're so stinking famous. But what have they accomplished in their life? Fame. That's it. The Hawk Tuah girl that's famous now. What has that girl accomplished in her life? She went and was being nasty on a video and got everybody's attention, and now she's like getting interviews all over the place and probably already made more money than I'll ever make. She's famous for being famous. She hasn't accomplished anything. She's not provided any value to society. She's not provided any wisdom to anyone. But yet at the same time, our people, young people in our nation, they clamor for these people. Why? Just because somebody said they're famous. And I just listened to somebody talking the other day about Jordan Peterson, how he's just one of the greatest minds of our days. And it's like, I've listened to this guy before. He's not that great. Okay? I don't know what people are seeing in the guy. Yeah, he says some good things here and there, but it's like, good night. Are we that starved for wisdom? Are we that starved for something that just is reasonable, that Jordan Peterson is this valuable source? But yet at the same time, I think it's just because he's famous. That's all there is to, and it's interesting, some people that just happen to get famous. Some people earn it. Some people actually do things and accomplish stuff, but some people it just kind of happens to them, and then we're enamored with them because they're famous. And I just think that's weird. In fact, when we went to Louisiana, I forgot what his name was already. I met somebody famous. And I remember I told my kids, I was like, hey, I met this person. I already forgot the name, and they didn't even know who it was. But then they looked up who it was. It was one of the people that won American Idol. And then all of a sudden, like, oh man, that was so cool. But at the same time, when I met him, it was just like meeting anybody else because they weren't introduced to me as one of the winners of American Idol. It was just, and then even after they told me they had won American Idol, I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know who they were. I don't pay attention. I don't pay attention to that stuff. But yet then all of a sudden my kids thought it was cool because I met somebody famous. It's like, you don't even know who it is, so why is it cool? And because we are we are addicted to famous people in our country, whether they have provided anything of any value or not. And let me tell you, most famous people today have not provided wisdom. How much wisdom did we get from Kamala Harris? How much wisdom did we get from Donald Trump? How much wisdom are you getting from, I don't know, who's famous people? Eddie Murphy or something like that. But yet people would fall over if he came walking in the room. Why? Because he's famous. He's not going to tell you something that's going to change your life and make your life better. But they're famous, and so they'll fall all over themselves to go see these people. That's what's wrong with our country today. But Solomon's wisdom made him famous. And so people's words today are not valued by the wisdom and help they provide, or even the success that comes from following these things, but they are valued by how many people liked what they said. They are considered an authority on things because they're famous. And it's even like this in the Baptist world. If you are a big name in the Baptist world, meaning you're popular, meaning you get attention when you go preach somewhere, they will get asked to preach, to like speak on a special subject at every conference, whether they're even, like for example too, there's preachers I know that have been asked to preach at like family conferences and things who kids didn't even follow them. They're not even Baptist. There was one preacher in particular that somebody mentioned, like, why is this person, I didn't know this person's kids or anything, but like none of his kids are serving the Lord. But he's a big name. He gets attention, so people will clamor to go hear this guy because he's famous. But when it comes to somebody who has actually succeeded, somebody who has wisdom, somebody whose advice has actually helped people succeed, we don't care. We only want to hear the big name with the big platform, the person that gets a lot of attention, and that's what's wrong with our country. And our country is following a bunch of degenerates. And even Baptists, our American culture is rubbing off on us, and we're following famous people rather than people who show wisdom, people who show godly character. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to turn out exactly what these people are turning out. And so people, they used to be famous because of some kind of merit, because of some kind of accomplishment. But now people are famous for just being famous. Sometimes they're famous for just being outrageous and being crazy and just being entertaining. Some people they're just very entertaining at what they say. Another example too. I've watched a couple interviews of this dude. Again, I don't get it, but Andrew Tate. Okay? Now, I will say, sometimes he will go on a good rant that is very entertaining to listen to, and I will actually like a couple things he said. He went on, there was one moment that he had where Piers Morgan was interviewing him, and he went on this rant about how he'll never take the COVID vaccine. He'll be the last pure blood. And he asked, I cannot do. But the way he said it was just like, we need more of that in this country. But at the end of the day, when you actually pay attention to the substance of what he says, it's not that great. But yet he's really famous. He's got a huge following. And so people will eat up what he said because he's famous. But if that same individual, had he never gotten any kind of platform, had the right people never said that he was famous, if he came walking into a room and was around a bunch of young guys and dropped the same wisdom, the same speeches, the same rants, who cares? Who cares what you say? You're a nobody. We judge everything somebody says based on who they are rather than what they're saying and what it actually means. And that is not why people came to hear Solomon. It was the wisdom. It wasn't the show that he put on. It wasn't to just see something outrageous. It was because of the wisdom, because back then it was a rare thing and it was considered valuable by people. Some people today, they literally judge somebody's preaching not based on, is it biblical? Not based on, is it good? Not based on, will it help? But how many clicks does it get on YouTube? Which I find hilarious. And some of the best preaching I ever heard, I was the only person in the audience. You know why? Because it was just one-on-one conversation with godly people. And they told me things that made a real impact in my life. Where I've gone to some of the big conferences and things before where the big names are preaching, And I've heard him saying a lot of stuff, and I've heard a lot of amens from the crowd and everything, but it's like, listen, I'm not dumb enough to follow that. But yet at the same time, because of who it was, people went nuts over it. So the access to wisdom and information, unfortunately, it's made things so easy, we almost aren't even capable of taking these things in a way that will actually cause it to stick. Again, when you really want to know something, when somebody tells you that, okay, husbands, why is it that our wives, when they tell us the plans that they have, why is it that even though they tell us 14 times, we forget so often? Okay, I mean, why do all of you do that? Okay. You know why? Because we don't care. So it doesn't register. That's why. Okay, that's you guys. You guys don't care. Okay. So it doesn't register. And so the thing is, the reason we're not really taking in any of this today, we're hearing it. It's being screamed out loud. It's at our fingertips. It's on our phones. It's on the internet. We have it everywhere. But we just don't care. We don't value it. Where if we actually cared, if it was really, really important for us to know what our wives have planned for us, you know what we would do? Honey, what time are we doing this? And we would listen intently. And if you have a bad memory like I did, we take notes. But if we really, really cared, we'd probably just remember. Because let me tell you, things we do care about, we remember. You know, you remember exactly how many paces it is, you know, out to your, you know, favorite hunting spot, where that scrape was and where that rub was and all that kind of, you know, we know all the details of those things. He's got to walk out 43 yards, not 42. You'll turn too soon and you got to turn left. Yeah. We know all the details of the things that we truly care about. And, you know, Paul said it right in 2 Timothy 2:15. He said, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And you know, I am thankful for all the tools that we have today. I'm thankful for all the easy access we have to information, but it will not make us better if we do not put in the work. We will not retain it if we do not see it as valuable. It's just going to go in one ear and right out the other. And so we've got to truly have an appreciation for these things. And I believe if we treasured wisdom and knowledge like they did back then, we would be off the chart, smart and wise today with all the information we have. But we need to get back to caring, because these things that people came from all over the world to hear from Solomon, they are just as valuable today. Or let me say it this way, they are just as beneficial today as they were back then. The problem is, as a society, we've just put no value on it. So, nobody cares. You know why a Honus Wagner baseball card is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? Because we consider it valuable because it is rare. But it's just a hunk of cardboard with a picture on it. That's all it is. But it's how it's considered. And so if somebody had that, they would treasure it. They'd go nuts over it. And that's what we've got to do with the Word of God. So with that, let's pray. Dear Lord, I pray this message was a help and a blessing to everybody. I pray that this will help inspire all of us, Lord, to have a true desire for wisdom and knowledge. Lord, help us to take advantage of all the resources and tools we have today. And let's put these things to use. We have no excuse for being biblically illiterate. We have no excuse for not having wisdom and to not succeeding in following your word. We have so much information available to us today, and so I pray you'll help us to put it to good use. In your name we pray. Amen.